Greetings and salutations to our fine podcast audience. Welcome to, I have to look, episode 118.
Yep, that's
We
what
made
it.
He says that every time now,
That's
but we always make it.
I keep thinking we should make that song. Looks like we made it.
Nobody knows that song yet.
Nobody?
I
know
bet
that
they
song.
don't. I bet I know it, but I don't know anything other than that line. Is
I
that Barry Manilow?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I also don't think I know anything other than that line.
Well, it is a Barry Manilow song.
It is, and
so
the other Barry
that's-
Manilow song I know is Mandy,
Yeah.
you came and you
Something.
gave without
Can we
taking.
stop? Can we stop
I think
now?
that's all I know of that one.
Stop saying we made it, Nathan, 'cause I don't want to have this discussion every time with Ed.
We made it.
All right. So, all right. If you're new to our podcast, my name's Jason, Ed, Nathan, to my right and left.
Hello,
And,
Barry Manilow.
Hello. And he ain't watching. So we are the teaching team at Community Christian Church. We have discussions every week based usually on questions that people send us about how to think more like Jesus in our world and react to it that way. And a couple weeks ago, Ed tried to introduce a question. I kept stopping.
You won't let me
And
have
I
it.
won't let him have it. Today's the day.
I committed to someone that we would answer this
Our
question.
faithful listener, Bob Stoner.
Bob Stoner, who's such a good guy,
He
does
has
so many
asked the
things
question.
around here for us.
He does.
He asked the question and said, I could just imagine y'all answering this on the podcast.
So what is the Bob Stoner
The Bob
question?
Stoner question is, if you eat food and you bless it when you have it, and then you eat it again as leftovers, do you have to bless it again?
Wow, what a conundrum. So I think the premise of the
Surely
question...
it was a joke.
I'm sure it was. The premise of the question being that does the blessing attach to the food forever and ever, or is it just, are you attaching the blessing to the sitting of the eating of that food?
I said to him at the moment that I think having food is a blessing every time you have it. So it's already, I'm just giving thanks.
I'd be giving thanks that it didn't go bad before
Yeah,
I was
that's right.
had a chance to eat
And
it.
some food gets better as a leftover, so
Oh,
you
yeah.
probably should be more thankful the
Yes.
second time.
I guess I just now am realizing that we are blessing the actual food. I am pronouncing a blessing on the food. I had always assumed that I was receiving the food as a blessing.
Well, it depends
That's a
on how
good point.
Are you giving thanks? Because some people say, let's give thanks.
Uh-huh.
And then that's a clear statement of what I'm supposed to
That's
do.
right.
And then they say, bless it to nourish our bodies, as if I don't say that, is it not going to nourish my bodies? Or
But
am I eating
sometimes-
stuff that...
Sometimes even a prayer ain't going to get that done.
No, that's right.
Because
Is that what I mean?
some of the junk I eat. So
Yeah, that's true.
That's always cracked me up is when people say, well, that nourished my body, and I'm looking at it going,
Mine-
no, that ain't happening.
Yeah. My answer is give thanks, rejoice always,
Give thanks.
pray continually.
That's right.
That's what Paul says to do. So if you got leftovers, thank God for them.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's a command that we have to pray before meals.
Not that I know of.
No, there is not. It is a practice that we see in Scripture, though.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the tradition comes from. But
Yeah.
it's not a command.
Yep.
So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this question.
I don't either.
I think
I think Bob was giving us a funny.
he was, but I think it would form you more into the image of Christ if you were giving thanks at all times
Sure.
In all things,
for
rejoicing.
the food you have.
Yes, over whatever you have.
I was just thinking back when you asked the question how I normally say it in our house, because we do also when we sit down at table. There are times when my family doesn't pray before a meal, but when we sit down together and we're all together is usually when we do. And the way I usually phrase it is kind of like you said, Nathan. I just usually say, "Thanks that I get this.
Yeah.
That this is actually a gift."
Mm-hmm.
Because there are times in other places in the world where this is a big deal to have a meal in front of me.
Yep.
It's always been a problem for me, and I'm hoping I'm not getting too serious about it. But when I pray the Lord's Prayer, give us today our daily bread, I don't think I have never had to pray that the
Right.
way that the original audience would have had to pray that
That's
prayer.
right.
And so for me, and I've done this on our prayer time when we do Facebook prayer, I'll sometimes pray through the Lord's Prayer, and I always stop at that phrase, and I don't say, God, give us our daily bread. I'll often say, thank you that we got it, or
Right.
Thank you that daily you have provided for me, and I've never been without, because I've just been too blessed to
Yep.
never have to think about that.
Yeah,
So,
that's for sure.
so Bob, that's our thoughts about blessing food. I bet he's not happy he asked that now.
He probably is. Bob's a generally happy
He's
guy.
a happy guy. So But yeah, we probably got way
I
deeper
will
into
share.
that.
I will share.
What are you gonna
this.
Share it.
Last night we were praying. I was thinking about you were saying your family prayer,
Yeah.
so I pray with each of my kids, and
Yeah.
we have kind of things around our house to help our kids learn to pray and all that kind of stuff. And so occasionally one of them will say, "Well, I want to pray tonight for bed," and I say, "Great." So she gets ready. And this is normally how she starts every prayer. God, you made such a perfect world for us, and I'm like, "Oh, that's great." And she goes, "All of us love this world. Some of us don't." And then she goes,
Who would that be?
"Most of us do. Most of us don't." She just kind of kept ripping on this prayer.
I'm covering everything.
And then she goes, "And help all the people on death row be safe."
Wow.
Because in our home, we have on our board, we always have different things we pray. This week, we're praying for people who are on death row,
Wow.
that God would be with them and that God would help them to feel. We just recently watched that movie, Just Mercy, and so they were very affected. So we've been going through that God would help them to feel loved and that God would help them to find Him and all those things. So she moved from most of us do love the world, most of us don't, and there's people on death row.
Wow.
So she's hitting all the big points in her
She
prayer.
is.
So
That's some deep praying right
yeah,
there.
she got that one down. So
Awesome.
there you
That's
go.
good.
Okay. So for today's episode, we reached a place that we haven't been for quite some time, other than Bob Stoner's question.
Well,
All
and
the-
we did make it to episode 118.
we
made
did.
it.
We made it.
Looks like
We've never been to episode 118 before.
Thanks. So anyway, the place we reached was I had used up all of our sent-in questions. I went to the
Did
database.
you say our sit-in question?
Sent.
Okay.
S-E-N-T.
Our sit-in question.
Our
This-
submitted
This
questions.
is us performing a sit-in. We're not leaving
No.
this church
No.
building until
Our
someone brings us a Diet Coke.
Sent.
The questions that have been submitted.
Submitted question.
I go to this database where all the questions get collected that you
Submitted.
guys send in, by the way, links in the description. And I went and for
So
this
if you
episode
don't
there was
like
nothing.
this, make sure you send
You have
in a
not
question.
enjoyed this
This is
so
your
far.
fault.
Yeah.
Whatever hell gets wrought upon this episode
Yeah.
is your fault.
That's usually
That
my
sweet
disclaimer.
little story about my granddaughter. Wouldn't have got that
Wouldn't have
if you'd
happened
have
if
sent
you
in
hadn't
a
said
question.
Maybe if you enjoyed that. If not, and it was too dark once it got to death
Yeah.
row, then you can move on.
If
That's
you
the way
don't
we
want-
roll in
If you
our-
don't want me making up questions, you better get after it.
All right.
Because
But to be
today
fair, you
I'm
told
making
me
one up.
this is not one you fully made up. You actually have
completely.
had conversations
I
about
have.
this.
Yes,
so.
I've
Yeah.
had several
Fair enough.
people through the years. I would say I
Through
have
the
had
many years.
many years. I have had people walk up to me after a service and just say, "Hey, I'm kind of thinking
Hey,
about something.
Jason."
I have a conundrum," and it usually comes back to this issue. And I thought, well, if people ask me in the past, they probably are asking, and it also got brought up in some recent current events. So
All right.
here is the general idea of the question that gets asked to me, and I thought it'd be an interesting discussion. It's a question about violence.
Okay.
And the question usually goes, I know what Jesus says, turn the other cheek, don't return evil for evil, love your enemies. It usually starts with that premise. Everybody's like, yeah, I know what that says, but, and there's always the big but, what about my enemy when my enemy's attacking me, or when someone tries to hurt me, or if I feel like someone I love is in danger, or myself is in danger, my property's in danger, or something like that. When is it okay, and this is the question, when is it okay for a follower of Jesus to go toward violence in order to stop something or protect someone or to stop evil, basically? Is there a place where violence is necessary, while it's justified that we fight to defend ourselves? Shouldn't we stop evil, protect other people? And so I thought that might be a discussion we might agree on, we might not agree on. Talking back to the last episode when somebody asked if we ever disagree on anything.
Well, and this is an issue that Christians throughout history have
Yes,
disagreed upon.
that's true.
And it would be one of those that I don't think fits firmly into a foundational issue. I do
No.
think there are
No,
people
yeah.
that can fit anywhere on this spectrum.
Exactly.
And
And for me, I think the reason it's probably been on my mind is because I've heard and seen arguments recently in our current climate where this discussion is being had by Christians. You know, the whole idea of, at what point, how do you feel about guns and gun rights? That's on the table. Certainly what we're seeing going on around the world in war right now, especially over in Ukraine, and where do we draw the line on that? And then most recently, like probably a month now ago or a couple months ago, we see someone on television, an actor, walk up on a stage and physically slap somebody across the face, and then people were like, well, he's just defending his wife who was attacked or made fun of in that moment. And I've seen Christians on one side say he should defend his wife's honor, and then I've seen others, he should have never done that at all. And so Christians, like you said, Ed, are definitely disagreeing on the role of violence and when it is appropriate and not appropriate. So I guess to say right up front, whatever we say, you don't have to agree with.
No, you don't have to agree with. We may very well not agree on the lines on all of it. I have come so far on this in my life.
Me too.
In that, before I was a follower of Christ, I think violence was a fairly regular option on the table for me. That if things didn't go the way I thought they ought to be, and I joke Becky regularly when she'll say something I don't like. I'll say out loud. I had a police officer who was a friend of my dad's who was trying to keep me out of trouble, and he would regularly say this to me, in that more than a handful of times after I had been in some encounter. He would go, what other people say is never any reason for you to put your hands on them. Words cannot lead you to attacking another person. That is always wrong. Okay. Now, at the particular time in my life, I disagreed with him. I disagreed with them.
Bet.
To the point that eventually they did restrain me from
them's fighting words. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
There are fighting words.
Yeah, this kind police officer would say to me many, many times, Ed, other people's words are no reason for you to put your hands on them.
Okay.
And so that was a tough line for me. I have moved beyond that line.
Well,
that line got moved.
Yeah.
But I've moved to other places. I would say now this is not. I would say where I am currently, and it is not tested. It's amazing how much once I got rid of alcohol and drugs out of my life, how little I felt the need.
There wasn't even fighting words no more. Yeah.
But anyway, that I'm fairly pacifist.
Okay.
I have said to people all along about things, if somebody comes, what will you do if somebody breaks in your house? I will try to leave the house. But there's nothing in that house. If I can get my family out, if I can get me out, they can have everything I have. Yeah. It just don't matter to me. So, but I have had a house broke into. Luckily, I wasn't there. But I'm fairly. I know that's not going to sit well with some people, but that's my. Now, I'm not in the moment. I don't know what would happen in the moment.
That's right.
That's the truth. I do not know what would happen in the moment.
And that's where I am too. And I think I said this to you guys before we started. In theory, that's where I am. And that's because of what I now know about the way of Jesus. I believe that, and the example he set for us when violence was done to him, and he didn't retaliate, and then he was pretty clear, turn the other cheek, don't return evil for evil, and he takes on that posture. That I'll say it this way: I want to be like that.
That me too.
I believe that's what, as a Christian, because my life and my existence is secure in the kingdom of God, and I don't have to worry about that. So even if I die, I'm not gonna die.
Right.
I feel that so strongly that I want to respond to evil in that way. But like you said, I have yet to be put in a life or death situation where I would have to choose that. So when people ask me this question, I say, I don't know what I would do, because you'd have to put me in that situation to find out. I know what my heart aspires to.
And the imaginations I plan in my head when I think about it, I imagine handling it the way that my heart wants me to.
Yeah.
So I no longer aspire to want to be violent.
Yes.
Even in the worst of situations, I aspire the other way. I will say the biggest part for me, and this is becoming less and less. This is even in the last 3 or 5 years. I'm trying to rid my life of the desire, even in verbal combat, to not be violent, to not want to win the argument. As Dallas would say, I'm trying to practice the discipline of not having to have the last word.
Yeah.
I don't have to win even at that when somebody says something. That is slower for me to come to. And I still imagine myself in arguments that I'm the victor.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that in and of itself is a death
That's right.
that you have to die
That's right.
in order to come to that place. And I don't disagree with anything you just said there. So
That's the bigger part for me, is working through in my mind. I don't have anything I am okay. There's no harm that can come to me.
Nope.
So I don't have to be as defensive as I naturally wind up being. I don't have to be as competitive as I only in fun. I can be competitive for the sake of fun, but I don't have to be that way. But that is my natural state.
I think so. I'm in agreement on. I think probably most of my life I have been on the very more pacifistic side of things, and really read almost everything Jesus said. Probably sometimes almost too literally, in some senses in my life. And I would say I was probably not very thoughtful about it. And there's a way to be very legalistic, and there are believers who are very legalistic on the side of the nonviolence issue of it. And I think in some ways that is not what Jesus is trying to do. I think I had to have this conversation recently with my girls. My oldest daughter, Destiny, just got baptized, and we were coming from the park, and we went through a roundabout. And if anything ever makes you want to kill somebody, it's going through a roundabout in Georgia. And so we had gone through, and I did it correctly. I was in the roundabout, and there was a person who was at the right stop, and I assume, because they honked at me several times very violently, I think they thought I was supposed to slow down to let them in. They were very upset that I was just breezing through the roundabout because there was no one on my side.
Once you're in the roundabout, you're in the
in it,
roundabout.
baby.
I
You're
understand
in.
the law. So I said
they
that.
did not.
I just flippantly said that, which probably wasn't the best way. As I said, look, I'm doing the right thing. You're going to have to wait. You know how you do. You're just under your breath. Well, my girls heard that and understood this man is assaulting, in their mind, my father for doing the right thing, and they are losing it in the car. They're like, oh my, he shouldn't be honking. We should be honking. Daddy, turn the car around. Turn the car around.
I do not have to turn around. I can just
That's right,
keep going around.
So they are losing it, and they're yelling, and my oldest at the time is like, that ain't fair. That ain't fair. That ain't fair. And I just said, all right, Destiny, hold on a second. I said, you and I have been having a conversation about you getting baptized. And I said, I just want you to think this through. I said, this is ultimately your decision, all this. I said, but Jesus says, before you choose to follow him, you got to count the cost. And I said, sweetie, following Jesus means you give up fair. And I said, what Jesus says, and this part is non-negotiable. However you work out all the non-violence, is not, bless those who curse you,
Right.
pray for those who
That's
persecute
right.
you,
Yes.
do good to those who do evil to you. Those are commands, and there is no way to follow
So
Jesus.
is turn the other cheek.
Sure.
So is
sure.
second mile living.
Yes, these are all things that you have to look at and say, these are commands in which I must live. And so I said to her, I said, do you want to live in a world where people get to honk their horn at you? I said, or they get to hurt you or say mean things about you, and you don't get to do bad things back to them. And I told her, I said, you don't have to answer. I said, but Jesus said, you got to count that cost up. I said, in a couple of days, you're about to go get in some water, and you're going to say, I want to follow Jesus. That's what you're agreeing to.
That's right.
And I said, so you need to know that. I said, you need to know that beforehand. A couple days later, one of my other daughters is having a conversation, the little quiet conversation they have in the car. They don't want mom and dad here. I wasn't in there. My wife was in there. And she goes, you got to get here with this. One of my daughters said to the other daughter, I wouldn't do that. And she goes, you have to. Jesus said you have to turn the other cheek. And she goes, I wouldn't. She goes, if somebody hit me, I would hit them back until they couldn't stop hitting me. And then my wife she said, hold on a second. She goes, I just want you to know, I perfectly understand how you feel. I think everybody feels that way. And she goes, you don't ever have to choose to do what Jesus said. She goes, but let me ask you this. She goes, when that person hit you, is what they did right or wrong? She said, it's wrong. She goes, when you hit them back, was that right or wrong? And she goes, it feels like it's right. She goes, it does feel like it's right. Is it evil for someone to ever hurt another person? Yes. And she goes, then is you doing double the evil, doing more of what Jesus wants or less of what Jesus wants? And she said, and my daughter said, she had to sit there and she goes, I'm not telling you, you have to agree with me. This is the way we try to do everything. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with Jesus. You can be Jesus wrong. You don't ever have to follow him. I want you to know, though, if you choose to go to church and say, I love Jesus, this is what loving Jesus looks like. And so she walks through that whole thing with her. Now, that's a more thoughtful way to approach things, is to sit. I think what Jesus is trying to do with and I think it's what he's trying to do throughout the Sermon on the Mount, is he is not giving us these positive commands that I somehow now have to turn the other cheek, which means I got to go find someone to slap me so that I can turn the other. What Jesus is doing is saying, I want to create you into the kind of person that what your response would be is when you're slapped, to not retaliate, but you would even say, let me show you, because the example Jesus gives in there, as he says, if a man takes his right hand and slaps you on the right cheek, then you have to turn the other cheek. And the example is the only way to take your right hand and slap another person across you on the right cheek is to backhand them across the face. He's referring to a very dehumanizing, and he's saying what you do is you say, if you're going to hit me, if you choose to do this, this is how you do it. And he goes, you're going to treat me like a person. You're going to slap. I'm not an animal that you get to do this to. Which then, as we know in Romans 12, heaps shame upon the other. It is showing publicly what they're doing is evil, which makes me think of the civil rights movement.
Right.
Think about the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where the people are filming, and you have grandmothers you have these not protesters, maybe in the wrong, these demonstrators who are walking peacefully across a bridge, and you have people on the other side with clubs and pieces of 2x4 and barbed wire right around bats, and they are beating in grandmothers and children, and they are not fighting back. And what that does is it heaps shame upon that government that would do that, or those people that would do that.
That you reminded me. I had a conversation with one of my daughters right after the slap. We know what it is now, and her first reaction was, she said, "Well, he did, insult his wife," and she was, sympathizing with the one who slapped, and I said that's fine. I said I can totally, like your wife said, I can totally understand that reaction, and I can't say that I wouldn't have felt some of the same things that he felt. I said, here's where it comes down for me. I said, when I watched that whole thing take place, and I watched the scene that you just described, what I want to see as a follower of Jesus, the question in my mind is, where is Jesus? Where do I see him at work in this interaction? Who is it that embodies the Spirit of Jesus the most? And I said, I want you to tell, and I said this to my daughter, I said, tell me where Jesus was in that. And I'm not saying that anybody was perfect in there.
No,
I said, but where do you see him most? And she didn't have to answer. She said, yeah, I get what you're saying. I said, for me, I see Jesus in the suffering. I see him in the non-retaliation. I see him in the, allowing harm to be done to me without having to have everything to be tit for tat and fair and all that. I said, and so when I find Jesus in a situation, I want to lean in that direction.
Right.
I want to be that person. I want to be on that side. That's where it always comes down for me.
Well, and I think the bigger thing, then that people take from this is these are and situations most of us will never be in, which is my back is against the wall. Someone is ready to kill me. There's no escape. I can't get out of my home. They're there. They're going to. Most of us do not end up in situations like that. But there are other situations I know people bring up. So what about Hitler? Do you just let Hitler get away with doing what he did? And the first thing I would say is the easiest Christian solution to Hitler was for 80% of the Christians in Germany not to vote for. No one ever brings that up. Everyone always wants to go through. Hitler was elected by 80% of the Christians in Germany. There was a solution that when we hear a man speaking evil and hatred, which he clearly had been doing the whole time, that the Christians would go, well, that don't look like Jesus.
And even if I like some of the things he
Yes.
says he's
going
going to
bring
give
us back
us,
to power, and
just because I like that he's going to make our nation strong, I can't put up with that. So
Because
I
it's
have
complete-
to vote against him. I have to vote against him.
And so when everyone goes, well, then it was the Christians who went in and fought the war, made it happen, that it goes down. I get that. But the fact that we won't acknowledge there were other solutions
Yes.
that could have solved it before. The person I think of a lot when I think of this, and I think this goes to thoughtful, God's not giving us necessarily laws, he's trying to create us into kind of people, is I do think about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who is a German pastor at this time, who was a pacifist. His nature was, he believed in pacifism. But he saw these atrocities that go on, and he becomes so convicted by it that he decides, right or wrong, I don't know where I would fall in that situation. I don't know. He decides to be a part of a plot to assassinate Hitler. Now, he actually is killed by the German army, but funny enough, or I guess funny is a bad word, but strange enough, not for the plot to kill Hitler, it was for his unwillingness to serve in the German military.
Right.
When they came to him and he said, I cannot fight your war, and that ends up getting him sent to a concentration camp. That's what he gets killed for. And I think this is an example, at least. Whether you come down on he should have been, or of course he should have gone and done
Or
that.
you take it to the people, and there were a lot of and this happens in every situation where there is violence happening, and I'm going to try to protect innocent people.
Right.
Dallas has a phrase of you offer gentle
Cooperation.
non-cooperation with evil, and you try the most gentle way to reach your goal. So the people who put their own life on the line to hide Jewish people
Yes.
and lied to the Germans. Was lying right? No, but they were accomplishing a greater goal.
Yes.
And a greater evil would have been, I'm going to protect you by killing this person.
Right.
I'm
Well, and
trying
I'm putting my life at
I'm putting
risk.
my life in between. That looks very much like the cross.
Mm-hmm.
I put my life. Now again, I get that soldiers also put their life on the line for that.
True.
So that's also the same. That's why there is a disagreement on this. So
That's right.
I get all of that. What would I do? I hope I would be on the side of the people that were hiding, that were helping, that were trying to help people get through instead of I'm going to actively kill people.
Well, I've seen stories. You mentioned earlier Russia and Ukraine, and in our country, the big highlight that people are focusing on is the way that the Ukrainians are resisting in military form against it. But I haven't seen as many people highlight this. There have been stories that have come out that there were churches in Kyiv at the time that said, "Hey, I know everyone's trying to flee the city. We're going to stay," because there are doctors that are leaving.
Yes.
They're thinking, so they would hold first aid trainings in the church to say, we don't leave. We're not going to necessarily go out and kill the Russians who are coming, but we will step out and we will provide first aid. We are going to protect people. That there are these, I think often, and this is the best thing I would say about this, is that there are the third way of Jesus, which things get so easily plugged into. There are two options. You have two options, which is you can be, kill or be killed. Those are your two options.
Yeah.
But there are always these third options that we just don't ever think of. And I do think, to say this just to clarify, because I spend a lot of time thinking about this, it depends also on what you mean by violence. Does violence mean that someone comes to hit me and I just lay there and let it happen? Is violence, in my version of what Jesus is talking about, is Jesus saying, I do not go with the intent to harm or to end your life.
I may stop you.
I may have,
Yes.
and I may have to get into a physical conflict with you. If you were trying to hurt my children or something, I'm going to engage. And I know we've used this on this podcast before, but one person I know who very much falls in the nonviolent side of Jesus' teaching, Greg Boyd, gave an example of, if someone broke into my home, he said, the way I hope I would respond is as if I had a mentally ill child who had decided they were going to kill my wife. He said, I love my wife. I love my child. I want to protect my wife at all costs. She needs me, because there is a mandate for us to protect those who are
Yes.
vulnerable and who are weak.
That's right.
But he said, the way I would do it, because this person is someone I love just as much as my wife is,
Right.
I would risk my entire being and risk it all on. He might kill me in trying to find a way to non-violently,
Save them both.
yes, and to subdue him. I might have to wrestle or something to hold, whatever that may mean. in a way that would not necessarily do violence to him, and not, my goal is not I want to harm this person because I'm angry that they've come into my home. My goal is love for both person. And that's what I mean by Jesus is trying to make us into a person who can thoughtfully do that. A person who, when a Roman soldier says, you have to carry my pack for a mile, and he was legally allowed to, the kind of person who would respond, well, I'll carry it 2 miles, which is a creative solution because he couldn't make him carry it an extra foot past a mile. So now you got a Roman soldier chasing this man down to get the pack back. There's a way in which the kind of person who thinks that creatively and thinks, I want to love and honor this person, not beat them back down, that's the kind of person that in one of those situations would be able to honor God, even if it ended in a way that maybe is not the ideal. And that's why I look at Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I think he, in that situation, I think he is going, I want to honor God, and I'm in an impossible situation. And maybe you disagree with the choice, or maybe you think he made the right choice. I think the process that he went through, it honored God, because he said, I want to love God, I want to love people.
And I think there are ways to do that on all these sides.
Sure.
I think everybody has to come
That's right.
There's no one right answer.
Yes, and that's where I wanted to end it, was to say, once again, I think I said it up front, I'm sure there are a lot of Christians who are listening, watching, would say, I think they're way off track. I'm on a completely different side. Okay, that's fine. I would just encourage you, do whatever you think honors Jesus, and figure that out for yourself. And we don't have a corner on all truth at all times. But I just thought, like I said, it's been asked of me many, many times. I thought it would be an interesting discussion, and it might, hopefully, spur you to ask some more questions, and maybe we can clarify if there's something specific you want us to talk about. So, but whether it be this or anything that you're struggling with, or you're just wondering about, blessing leftovers, whatever it might be, click the link in the description and send us a question, and maybe yours will happen next week, because as of right now, this taping of this episode, the list is empty, so you might be first in line.
There you go.
All right, so with that, we will see you guys next week.